But you've got to get onto this fella. Honest to God, you've got to get onto this fella. He's absolutely brilliant. And the Red Bird. You don't look so bad yourself, right? Thank you, Red. Thank you. And there's our wonderful music man. And there he is, Derek Shelmerdine. Hi, Derek.
Hi, guys. Frank.
Evening, Derek.
Hi.
Happy bank holiday.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, it hasn't rained. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Honestly, lads, I didn't know it was bank holiday. I just didn't know. And I said to Jason just always phones me up just before the show. And I said, I didn't know it was bank holiday. I said, and you were off? And he said, yeah. And I just didn't know. Shows you what I know, doesn't it?
We're friends.
And the Red Bird says, hi, Derek.
Hi, Red Bird.
Lynn Ellis. Hi, Derek.
Oh, Lynn.
The Will P. Hi, Derek.
Will P. Hi.
Good evening, Derek. Paul Turner.
Paul. Hi.
And there you go. With a cup of coffee. No cheap, no pints for you, Derek, off Tony LFC. Hello, Derek.
Hi, Tommy.
Isn't that brilliant? I love these people, you know. So, what have you got lines up today? You know, what I was told, that it was the music, which is my music, and which is, I know it's Anthony's music from the, you know, what they were playing in the Vietnam War.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought we might broaden it slightly as well because, I mean, the whole protest thing really started in the 1940s with the folk revival, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and through the 50s. And in fact, I mean, you know, there'll be one of the stories about Pete Seeger falling foul of censorship for a Vietnam War song he did. So I think, you know, a lot of it will be associated with the Vietnam War, but I thought we could drift across into people like Phil Ochs, Bob Dylan, Woody Guthrie and the like, because they all very much play a part. I mean, Woody Guthrie was one of Bob Dylan's real heroes. You know, when he first went to New York, one of the first things he did, I think in '61, was go and see Woody Guthrie in hospital because he had Huntington's, Woody Guthrie. And he drank a little bit too much as well, but you know, he wasn't a well man, but he was a seriously influential figure on the influence on the music of certainly the 50s and 40s, 50s, and well beyond. I thought it might be interesting actually just to see how the Vietnam War came together, because I don't know how well people know the background, but basically what happened was it was, as you know, it was a French colony. And then in the Second World War, when France was overrun, Japan basically took over Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh was fighting guerrilla warfare against the Japanese. So, I mean, he was a war hero. Then, of course, the Japanese lost the war, the Allies won, and the French went back to recolonize it effectively. And, I mean, bear in mind now that Ho Chi Minh is a war hero to North and South Vietnam. And the French were actually defeated in Dien Bien Phu in '54. The Americans were payrolling a lot of it. And that was when they then started sending in advisors. And the first American was killed in '59. And the first direct participation was in '62 of American. Well, it was actually the first participation was helicopters. They were flying the Vietnamese Southern troops into battle. But what really kicked it off was on the 4th of August, '64, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, when the Americans claimed that one of their battleship, I'm not sure if technically it was a battleship, but one of their warships was attacked. And they never actually declared war on North Vietnam. So the whole conflict very much started from there. The first American bombings happened shortly after that. And then it really, so, you know, we're very much at 1964 now. And then it developed, and really the height of it, you could argue, was around 1968. And that was the turning point in the war, the Tet Offensive, when the North launched hundreds of simultaneous attacks on towns and villages and cities, took the Americans completely by surprise. The Americans eventually, after about 3 months, had quelled all of these attacks. But that was very much the beginning of the end. I mean, the Paris peace talks started shortly after that, and they went on for about 5 years. So, you know, there's quite a bit of background as to why the Americans were actually in there. And one of the reasons they were there is, I mean, far back as Eisenhower, they were terrified of communism. And they saw that they saw danger that if Vietnam becomes a communist country, you know, what was called a domino effect, the whole region could become, you know, communist region. And that was really what was driving the Americans. And that goes back in a way to the 50s, McCarthyism and the fear of communism then, the Un-American Activities Committee. So, you know, a lot of the cause of the Vietnam War, as it were, or America's concern for Vietnam, goes back into the 50s. It was really all about the concern that communism might, you know, take over the whole region. And
well, you had the likes of McCarthyism, didn't you?
oh, absolutely.
And people getting banned and, you know, exiled rather, you know.
Yeah,
To countries, you know, great people, great writers, and
yeah,
you know, they lost a lot of income through the ridiculousness of McCarthyism. And you know, Vietnam, as you said, it was all really to stop communism, because even today, you know how America feel about communists. It's absolutely ridiculous. They've got this phobia about communism.
Yeah.
Even socialism, you know, even socialism.
Yeah.
Can I just before you go on, some brilliant things here. I'll go with Judge Shit says, as a lad, when I first started going to match from Belfast, I loved going to the Royal Court for gigs. My favourite gig I seen there was Squeeze in 85, 86. Great bands, great songwriters. And there's our sponsor. Good job I mentioned. Good job that, wasn't it? And he says, hi Frank, Anthony and Derek, not forgetting our boy wonder, Jason. Looking forward to a great show, lads. Whenever I hear about Vietnam, it always takes me back to the Robin Williams movie, Good Morning Vietnam. And it does, you know, I think it's strange, you know. I'd like your take on that, to be honest, as well, Derek, if you might. Lots of people, you know, they loved Robin Williams. You know, he was fantastic as the DJ and whatever. But I'm not saying the majority of people that watched the film only watched it for the songs, because it was a fantastic soundtrack.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are some great Vietnam War films as well. I mean, Apocalypse Now, Deer Hunter, Full Metal Jacket. I mean, they really capture what it must have been like to have been out there. Because they were conscripts, of course, most of them. In fact, if you look at the statistics across the war, it's quite interesting, really. The peak troop strength was in 1969. So that was really, you know, after the Tet Offensive and all the rest of it. There were 543,482 troops in Vietnam at that one time, a massive number. It's reckoned just over 9 million military personnel rotated through Vietnam across the course of the conflict, and 58,000, well, just over 58,000 people died as a result of, died in the conflict. So, I mean, it was a very big affair. I mean, when you look at that now, 500,000 troops in Vietnam at that one point, at the highest point. You look at our army now of 50, 60, 70,000 people, and it really starts to put things into context.
It does, actually, because what you have as well, I think Anthony wants to say there, but
no, what I was going to say is, again, during warfare, the average age of the deaths, which is harrowing, was 18 and 19 years of age.
Absolutely.
And
But not only that, I always get the image of Vietnam and napalm.
yeah,
It was the most disgusting weapon ever made. It was totally disgusting. Not only that, but you had the smart bomb as well. Once the smart bomb hit the ground, it sucked up all the oxygen, and that was disgusting. People just died. The most people who died were civilians.
Yeah.
Civilians. It was a war on civilians.
yeah,
That's what I call it. It wasn't a war on communism. It was a war on civilians because that's who died. Every time Vietnam gets mentioned, I just see the image, and everybody knows this. Anybody old enough, that is. If the young girl running along the road, the skin falling off after a napalm attack.
one famous picture, I think, was made to magazines and made everything. And since in the days well before the internet, which was known, which is of a small child running through the streets and basically burning with what had dropped. I always, growing up when I was a kid, it's kind of I regard as my generation, our generation's first glimpse of visual warfare, which was harrowing to watch, because even the limited TV coverage that we had over here, we had various programs, World in Action and the like, would show it, and it was just horrific. And I always associate that the Vietnam War with loss, death, and not a win or a lose situation. Just everyone lost.
Yeah,
everyone lost. But I also, I know that the protests, in terms of song and the written word, almost kicked in from the beginning, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, very much. If you look at Bob Dylan, Blowing in the Wind, you're looking at the very early 60s. I mean, he's really talking in a more a broader context there. But that kind of Dylan-esque protest songs very much started in the early 1960s. And some of the songs might be worth mentioning, one or two. Some of the songs were actually about events that took place. And one of the most famous would be the Kent State University shootings at the protest in 1970. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Neil Young wrote it. A song called Ohio that sort of captured those events. And for anybody who's not aware of what happened, basically we're talking the 1st through to the 4th of May, 1970. And it was a university protest started on the 1st of May. And, the protests on the campus, and then it went into the downtown. It got a bit violent. So the mayor and governor brought in state troopers, and there was, riots again the following day. And there were like 1,000 state troopers there, National Guard rather. And on the Monday, by the midday, another 3,000 had gathered for another protest. And what had happened the previous day, the guardsmen had used tear gas to try and did dispel the crowd. But on the Monday, the fatal day, the crowd was going nowhere. So some of the guardsmen actually opened fire, and 4 students died. 9 were wounded. And it's an ill wind. I mean, one of the guys who was a student there, a guy called John Philo, he was a photography major at the time, and he took this very famous photograph of a girl, Marianne Vecchio kneeling over Jeffrey Miller, who'd been fatally wounded. It's a very famous picture, a bit like the Vietnam ones we were just talking about. And he won a Pulitzer Prize for that particular photo. So it's fascinating. But there are several examples of riots and things when there are literally thousands of state troopers and police and military involved in the demonstrations. Because some of the demonstrations at the time were civil rights demonstrations. The civil rights demonstrations really started in the 50s, was when that gathered momentum, I think. But by the time we get into the early 60s, a lot of the demonstrations were actually merging. Martin Luther King made a famous speech. I think it's called Beyond Vietnam. And it's technically a civil rights speech, but it's also an anti-Vietnam War speech. And in it, I can't remember the exact quote, but in it he said, our black guys and white guys, lads, are dying out in Southeast Asia alongside each other, when back home in the southern states, they're not even allowed to sit next to each other in school. And, he's making the point of segregation very much. So there was a great crossover by the time you get to the late 60s of Vietnam, anti-Vietnam and civil rights demonstrations. It really merged into one and the same thing in a way.
I think the when we hit the 60s and someone had kind of stood back on the freedom of speech button, and because of the power of music and what we've been through at the end of the war, and people were feeling kind of more comfortable with expressing an opinion. And certainly the student, us in comfortable England, I mean, we heard about it big time through the likes of song. Crosby, Stills, Nash was a massive thing when someone explained to me what the song was about, and then through the news wire, and thankfully it's not gone anywhere. There's still that level of people's protest which we needed, but it's wondrous that some of that stuff got through. See, the BBC were ruthless at just blocking a record with whatever the subject that they felt inflamed people's passions, so they'd ban it, block it. But some of the songs that I'm sure you're going to mention tonight got through all of that, and we got to benefit from it.
Oh, I think so. I think freedom of speech is paramount to any civilized society, basically.
Freedom of speech. I've got to butt in. I have to butt in. Freedom of speech is gone.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lad just been hijacked.
Yeah.
Hijacked.
Yeah.
An airport, not the only airport or the de Gaulle airport, but in Paris. Budov. Pavel Budov. And he's just been hijacked because of his Telegram ping. And it's shocking. They're going to drum up charges like they did against Anthony Snowden, the whistleblower. Also, Julian Assange. It's shocking what people are doing now. It's shocking. I'm talking about politicians.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm talking about politicians, and the shootings of them. They were students.
There were students, yeah.
Students on a campus.
Yeah. Was
and it hasn't changed in America. It hasn't changed in America at all. Now everything American. It's like the terminology of Americans that come over here. Hey guys, hey you guys, and guys this and guys that. That's all terminology. And all their things is coming over here. It's all coming here. Because what you've got all this fast food nonsense. You know, the likes of Big Mackies or McDonald's or whatever they're called, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's more obese people in this country than there's ever been with all these fast food things. Everything American is coming here, including, might I say, is their policies, their foreign policies. I've never known this fella's been in, 2 minutes, Starmer, and look what he's doing to us. Look what he's doing. Anyway, you know, I'm awfully, can I just, I went on a thing there, I'm awfully sorry, and it shouldn't be like that, but there's one for you, Andy Gamble. The soundtrack to the movie is amazing. So, to put Derek and Anthony on the spot, what's the only Searchers song to be played during the movie? Now, I'll tell you why he's put that. It's because Andy is in a tribute band called Searching. And believe you me, they're brilliant doing all the Searchers song. That's why he's asked you. I would never have a clue. I
can't remember. It might be Needles and Pins.
Needles and Pins. Now, do you know what?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Do you know
but on
what?
the Searchers front, happy birthday, belatedly, great gig in the sky, Chris Curtis. It's his birthday today.
Oh, go away.
The drummers, yeah.
Yeah,
I was looking at something. I noticed that today is the anniversary of his birthday. He was born in 1941. So I thought I might mention that, but I didn't realize it'd be such a good segue introduction to that, because he's the reason Deep Purple exists, of course. He tried to form a band called Roundabout. The idea being a set of musicians and other musicians sort of hopping on and off like a roundabout. And sadly, he left the project before it came to fruition, and a group called Roundabout went off to I think it was Sweden or Finland on tour. They went as Roundabout, and when they returned, they changed their name to Deep Purple. So we have Chris Curtis to thank for the fact that Deep Purple are in existence.
Well, what Andy Gamble says there, you know, what Searchers song was played in Good Morning Vietnam.
I can't.
You said, no, Derek said it could have been Needles and Pins. And I'd go along with that for one simple reason. Do you know what it is? You wrote it. You wrote the song, Needles and Pins. Needles and Pins. Sonny Bono. Yeah.
Sonny Bono, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because, I think.
Yeah, that's like an American connection, if anything. Can I just go through some? Oh yeah, we're on there anyway. The Searchers song has sugar and spice. It's the first song played during the movie. Get in there, Andy.
I should remember that now.
Oh, that's fun. There's a cracker there. And could you imagine it though? Sugar and spice and all things nice.
That came to my mind was
in a war.
In a war. Jimi Hendrix's version of Dylan's
Watchtower. All Along the Watchtower.
Yes.
That was his only American hit, you know. Which is in
his anyone who demonstrated against Vietnam.
That's right.
Were bumped off. Anyone, any powerful leader, anyone demonstrating against civil rights, as you know, Martin Luther King, and he was bumped off. John Lennon. I don't care what anyone says. Anyone. That Chapman, he was definitely brought in. He's a sleeper, him, for the CIA. I don't care what anyone says. He was murdered to get him out the way. Nixon hated him.
He was under investigation, wasn't he?
Oh,
One of the reasons he didn't leave the country
no.
was he was concerned he wouldn't get back in.
Yeah. Well, that's why he never left.
Yeah.
If John was left, he'd be still alive today, barring any diseases. He'd still be alive today with loads and loads of music that we could enjoy. I'm sorry,
And one of the most famous Christmas songs of all time, of course, "War Is Over." If you want to.
And as Aura Mistwood says, absolutely, I think she's agreeing with us there. She's agreeing. George CCR's fantastic anti-Vietnam song, Fortunate Son, was to me a classic. And as Aura says, I think it's about being weaned of freedom of speech, being weaned of it, and that's what I think that's what she's saying. I'm sorry there. I'm sorry. I had to get those couple of the John Shet say hang on. John Shet, this is what he asked me. Frank, as a historian, can you confirm that Ho Chi Minh? No, that's it. The big city's named after me. Was a chef in a London hotel. I know he was in London working in hotels, but I don't know whether he was a chef, and I just don't know. Ho Chi Minh, like a lot of other people, like Adolf Hitler's half brother Wilhelm. He worked at the Adelphi.
Right.
Wilhelm Hitler. All right, mate. What's your name? Wilhelm Hitler. Oh, okay then. How's your kid getting on? Oh, I think he's going to become Chancellor. You can imagine that. Chancellor of Germany. But anyway, I'm sorry about that to stop you in the thing, but I had to get the freedom of speech out.
Oh no, absolutely. I think it'll be a very, very long time before it gets back to where it used to be, I think. But somebody just mentioned "Fortunate Son," which is a classic Vietnam war song, Creedence Clearwater Revival from '69. John Fogerty wrote it, and he was actually drafted into the American Army. He was in the reserves for a while. And then he was about 21, I think. And he spent 6 months on active duty. And what the song was about, what inspired him to write it, was one thing he noticed was that it was your working class lads who were out there. A lot of the senators' sons and other sons of people in high places, weren't finding their way to the front line. So, that's what the Fortunate Son. It inspired him to write the Fortunate Son song. It's a great song if you haven't heard it. It really is a great song.
Yeah.
Well, I think a Bad Moon Horizon would have been appropriate for the Vietnam War, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. We were talking about censorship earlier. There's a couple of great examples from the 60s and the 70s. First one's Bob Dylan. Bear in mind, this is 1963. Bob Dylan, had the Ed Sullivan Show, broke the career of the Beatles and and Elvis. So it wasn't a music show, but it was a very prestigious and important show to get on. He was invited on, and he was going to do a track called "Talking John Birch Paranoid Blues." John Birch were a right-wing organization who saw threats under every bed, as it were. And when he rehearsed it, the producer said to him, "Oh, you can't sing that, you can't sing that." So typical Bob Dylan, he decided rather than change to another song, he decided he wouldn't bother singing at all. If they didn't like his choice of song, they could find somebody else to fill that 4 minutes. So I always thought that was a typical piece of...
so he never sang? Didn't he sing it at all, no?
No, he didn't sing that. They wouldn't let him sing that, and he refused to sing anything else. I'm not sure he ever actually went on the Ed Sullivan Show after that. I need to check that, but I've got this feeling that he never bothered with Ed Sullivan again. I mean, Bob Dylan was very much his own guy, as it were, and a lot of the stuff he was writing was stream of consciousness, which was very popular with writers and stuff, I think, in the 1960s. But going back to Pete Seeger, at the 67, 68 time, he released a song called Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, which was very much an anti-Vietnam War film. And what it did, it had a phrase called Nervous Nelly in it. Don't be the captain in it sings, "Don't be a nervous Nelly," when he's dragging these people, putting them very much in the way of danger. And that was the reason the producers took a dim view of that was because it was a quote from a Lyndon Johnson speech when he referred to peaceniks and anti-war protesters as nervous Nellies. There will be some nervous Nellies. So being in the song, it's an obvious reference to LBJ. And what happened? The first time he was on the show, again, he sang it in rehearsals. They didn't tell him he couldn't sing it, but it was broadcast about a month later. And when the broadcast show went out, they'd actually edited Pete Seeger's song out of the show, so he just wasn't in it. But what was nice, that was the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, and they went to the press and enlisted other people's help in this obvious case of censorship. And Pete Seeger, about a year later, almost exactly a year later, he was invited back on the show, and he sang the song, and it went out in the edited version. So, it's interesting to see how sometimes, the censorship works, and sometimes even the show itself sees it as censorship.
It just shows you, doesn't it? Like these songwriters, whatever, writing these anti-war songs. And what song springs to mind is, I forget the bloody song. It's about forget it, but very gruff. It was a little band, or two of them were singing it. I'll try and get back to it later. But it's always spring. I'm not going to sing it, you see. But it was brilliant. And it was all about war. Is it 25 years or something like that? I forget the title.
There was Ed Starr who did the track War, but I don't know if that was related to I know there was a massive issue, and certainly coming from the likes of Muhammad Ali, the boxer, who refused to be drafted, I think three times. And there's no way this black man is going to jump on a plane, travel the world to kill other black men.
Be killed.
For what reason?
But more blacks died in Vietnam than whites.
Yeah.
We just send out the blacks, get out there, you'll be all right. And it's just, that came to me then, that bloody song. I'll be up all night now. Sure, get it. Sure.
The one that blew me away with being a guitar freak was Jimi Hendrix Woodstock when he did Star Spangled Banner. And he did it as sound effects of screaming, crying, bombs dropping, all in the space of 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I think the jury was out on that one, whether, because the establishment, the chat show hosts and stuff, didn't know how to talk about it. And there were those that applauded him.
I've got the name of the song.
Go.
The Eve of Destruction.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant song.
It's unbelievable.
Barry Maguire.
Maguire. I couldn't even think of the singer.
Yeah.
The Eve of
that track is that it kind of hinges into the flower power era.
Oh, very much, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was all tied together, wasn't it? Really.
Yes.
That's whole generation. We're really looking at the years 66 to 68, 69. So it was very much tied into a complete change in the direction of popular music. You know, beat music had become much heavier in terms of being rock music. For the first time in half a decade, the American music scene and the British music scene had converged with this, you know, new rock music. And a lot of these bands were songwriters, people like Neil Young, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So, you know, they were able to write a lot of their own material. And it was, I mean, as you were saying earlier, it was the first televised war. I can remember watching the news, and you'd never seen anything like it. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Do you know what? I really, hand on heart, admire musicians, songwriters, and writers, performers who do something like that, do something to oppose what's going on. And surprisingly, there's not that many of them.
No.
You'd think we'd all stand up and do something, but we don't. We follow, as Frank has said countless times, the script which is written by country leaders, politicians. But for an artist to think something like that is...
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Because music does generate messages. And it's getting to the young. This is why, you know, that came out years ago, Eve of Destruction. I couldn't think about it. But it's had me thinking at the time as well. You know, we're always... I said, and this is honest to God, I said in 1973 to my mother, not grandmother, to my grandmother, I said to her, they were talking about wars or whatever it was. I think it was around when Nixon was trying to get his troops home from Vietnam, of all places. And I said, if a Third World War starts, it won't start there. It'll start in the Middle East.
Absolutely.
Honestly, that's what I said. I said that to my grandmother as a young lad. Yeah. And she said, no. She called it the yellow peril. You know, well, so, and look what's happening now with, I'm sorry to go on, but look what's happening with China, Taiwan, and America. You know, they just want a war with anyone, these lunatics.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many flashpoints now for the, you know, next potential big one. I just spotted the comment there from George, Marvin Gaye. I mean, that really is a landmark album, landmark track. And that was written about some police demo, violence at a anti-war demo in '69. But he's got another great Vietnam song called I Want to Come Home for Christmas. And it's written from the point of view of American POW who wants to come home for Christmas. And it's got a great background. The I Want to Come Home for Christmas song is originally one of the Four Tops who actually wrote the original song, took it to the Four Tops, and it was too political for them. So via another songwriter, Marvin Gaye got involved with it because he was looking for a follow-up to What's Going On, and he ended up recording. It wasn't released for a while, but you know, when you're looking out in a few months' time, Christmas songs, if you haven't come across Marvin Gaye's I Want to Come Home for Christmas, it's well worth checking out.
That is what George Sett says. What's Going On by Marvin Gaye was a seminal track which linked both civil rights and anti-war in a beautiful and poignant way.
Yeah,
you wouldn't think that the likes of Marvin Gaye would sing, you know, anything like that. And look at the violent death he got from his own father.
Well, exactly. But Motown really didn't want to put that song out. Berry Gordy Jr., the guy that ran it, he really, really wanted to distance Motown from any political involvement, particularly in the Vietnam War. I mean, it was very, very unpopular. But of course, you know, it had a lot of other connotations. But in the end, Marvin Gaye won over, and it got released eventually.
Well, a couple of just let me read these out. There's only a couple here. Paul Turner, Frankie Goes to Hollywood song, Two Tribes, back in the 80s. Yeah. Well, that was the Cold War still going on then.
Yeah.
That was the Cold War. You had Reagan, didn't you, and Yeltsin. Or was it Gorbachev? I think it was Gorbachev in the ring. Gary Rigby, The Fugs, Kill for Peace, greatest protest song of the 60s.
Yeah.
And we made Stay Evans. What's Going On is a masterpiece LP. And it says, I think that's a great title because we always say, don't we, well, what's going on?
What's going on, yeah.
What's going on? We say it all the time. What's going on? And what's going on with the world? It's not you or I. It's politicians. It's all right for politicians, to say, well, listen, lads, to the general, listen, I need our army to get over there. It's shocking what these people, we vote them in.
Yeah.
We vote them in to give us hard times. It's as simple as that. I never voted for the last election, by the way.
There's a wonderful track, one of the greatest rock tracks of our generation, is by Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. And it's so many times politicians were hijacking to highlight them as in this glow of goodness, when he actually wrote that as a protest against the way veterans and the way people couldn't afford to live. And so it's kind of ironic that they would adopt it as an anthem for great and power, and he actually wrote it to criticize the way that they're running the country, saying as
our Misford says, rulers.
Yeah, exactly.
We vote the bloody rulers in.
Yeah, and usually regret it.
Yes.
Yeah.
On a slightly different tack, I mean, one band that you wouldn't think would be involved in anti-Vietnam War kind of songs was The Clash. And in 82, the Beast, well, it was a double A side, Should I Stay or Should I Go? The other side, it was released as a double A, was Straight to Hell. And what it is, it's having a pop at absent fathers, American servicemen who fathered children with Vietnam ladies, and then obviously went back to America. And that's what I think it's the second verse of the song is about. But you wouldn't tend to think of a band like The Clash, or really a whole next generation after the hippie generation, the punk. I mean, that's full on sort of punk generation. And even then, some years after the event, as it were, it's still fresh in the mind of people. And I think that's really interesting.
Well, Gary Rigby says, local band of Liverpool saying that poem was a protest song. And KP, he goes, a letter Adams get here, referring to the Gulf War. War and music sadly go together. I've got to stop here. I've got to go to the break. I've got to get a drink. But anyway, it's only a request by some people who asked me to re-show the crypt at the Catholic Cathedral. And I've got to say that it was haunting to me. It really was. And I'll tell you when it finishes, the hairs on me, and they did, I've never felt that experience before, went up, stood up, the hairs on the back of my neck. I asked the doctor about that, funny enough. I was just chatting to this doctor. And I said, how does hairs go on the back of your neck? And he said it's, what did he say? He said it was some sort of, what did he say? I forget. I forget the medical terminology, but he said it's when you're afraid. That's what he said.
Fight and flight.
You know, I forget the medical term. Just forget it. And it's a great. Go on.
The thing when we listen to or experience something that we find very moving, like a piece of music, or sometimes we get the hairs on the and it's
like goosebumps. That's the only way I could. You know, it's amazing, but I forget the medical term he used, and he said I don't know whether he said afraid or fear. I'm not quite so sure what he said. That's how they go up, you know. Well, anyway, here's that little clip. I hope you enjoy it on history after the show, after the break.